Kia ora and welcome. I'm stepping in tonight for the brilliant Hannah McQueen, and I'm thrilled to be guiding you through this essential conversation about growing wealth, creating the retirement you deserve. Retirement isn't just a finish line, it's a phase of life where you should have freedom, fun, and choice. But with rising costs and limited support from New Zealand Super and KiwiSaver, many Kiwis are realizing they need to take charge of their financial future now. Tonight, we'll unpack what it really takes to bridge the retirement gap, build wealth at any age, and make smart, confident decisions with your money, whether you're 35 or 60. Let's get started. We've got an action-packed agenda tonight. First off, we're going to cover off why you want to grow wealth, harnessing your own tendencies for success. We'll define how much you need for retirement. That's going to be our anchor in terms of plan. We'll then discuss critical wealth building principles, which, to be honest, are universal. How you distill those building principles to create a personalized wealth plan, and how you adjust that for your individual goals and as life changes. And we'll be wrapping up with a Q&A. People have submitted amazing questions. I'll try to get through as much as I can. My amazing producer, Amelia, is sitting in the background. She'll be collating any questions that you pop in the Q&A box. Please don't hesitate. I can answer absolutely anything. So we'll do that at the end together. And just a wee disclaimer, this presentation is provided for informational purposes only. The content of this presentation is not intended as a substitute for regulated financial advice. If you need help to design the appropriate wealth plan for yourself, I really do encourage you to reach out to a qualified financial advisor like me and my team. I'll have a real deal for you at the end in that regard, because we would love to help you design your wealth plan. So you might be thinking, she's not Hannah McQueen. Who is she to tell me anything about my money and growing wealth? So my name is Katie Wesney. My background is I am a chartered accountant as well as a qualified financial advisor, and I'm the head strategic coach at Enable Me. So I have amazing clients like yourselves, but I also help coach our coaches nationwide. I've got 20 plus years experience in accounting, investment, banking, and consulting. I've built and sold my own seven-figure business. I've worked across Europe, US, and New Zealand, and I am a columnist and media commentator. Been here for the last decade. I've got a real passion for helping my clients succeed. And for us at Enable Me, our job is to really make sure we optimize outcomes for our clients and help them reach their financial potential. And I want to be really targeted tonight. So, can you please share with me how close you are away from retirement? So, are you less than 15 years, more than 15 years, or you're already retired? If you could please select the box that fits your situation, and I'll make sure that I target my delivery, because different strategies are appropriate at different life stages. So again, we're going to unpack that together as we progress. So you've had enough time to do that. So those results will pop up. So there are a few of us who are retired. Welcome. Um, and a pretty even split, actually, more than 15 years and less than 15 years away. In all reality, that tells me we have time. And again, we'll try and go through every life stage in terms of focus and how that feeds into plan. So, thank you. So, why should you prioritize wealth? To me, when you're doing so, it really does create options, whether you want to follow a passion, have more options for what you want to do for work, or to live a different lifestyle. For some people, they want to grow wealth to solve a problem. Often that problem is they have a retirement gap. What does that mean? It means that your savings or investment forecast is not following the rate that you will meet your retirement goals. For a lot of people, when they're growing wealth, it improves security, and that is so important to me and my clients. We're trying to reduce the impact of volatility. What we mean by this is allowing for your plan, not going to plan, establishing a buffer for room for error. None of us could have planned for COVID, inflation, geopolitical conflicts, Trump, Trump again. No one could have, would have planned the GFC unless you're one of the few experts following the human behavior around the housing bubble, Cyclone Gabriel. For lots of people, wealth means trying to help their kids to leave a legacy. And for some of my clients, that wealth plan is just about being ambitious. Maybe you're all set for retirement, you're mortgage free, but like an athlete going for a world record, you want to push the boundaries beyond what you thought was possible for yourself. This is most certainly a valid reason to grow wealth. So, what is your reason? And sometimes it's a mix of lots of those different things. And if you are feeling behind, you are not alone. Really sobering stats. I hate giving these stats. I rally against these stats. It's one of the reasons I do what I do. 44% of Kiwis feel prepared for retirement. 54% of Kiwis worry about money daily or weekly. That is a lot of headspace and time where you could be doing other things, living a better life, in my mind. And 70% of Kiwis expect they need to work past retirement age. There's also another sobering stat that I generally give there is that over 1 million Kiwis are supporting children who are not financially independent. So let's grow wealth, team. Let's fix this. And what I love about what we do and having a really robust plan, the best part is you get to decide what financial success looks like for you based on your goals, your values, and based on where you are at life. Your financial plan for success will depend on your starting point, your goals, your tendencies, the degree of support needed, and what your improved cash surplus could be. And when I say cash surplus, that's just the money left over. A good financial plan will be refined and reworked regularly as assumptions are tested, improvements are made, and more information becomes available. Nothing is ever lock and leave, otherwise, it becomes irrelevant to you. And at Enable Me, we work to pillars of financial success. We focus on these pillars to build a really strong base for wealth creation and ultimately prepare for retirement. And often we're doing these concurrently, but from that really strong foundation. Because if you don't, you can imagine a house with kind of shonky piles, etc. You may do an amazing renovation on top, but because of those wonky piles, it could collapse at any point in time. So we want to make sure we have that really strong foundation in place in terms of plan. And to me, that's about establishing really strong money fundamentals. So again, easy to say, but what does this involve? And to me, there are layers around building that really solid base, which we're going to unpack together really soon. But first, you've got to understand your natural tendencies or inclinations around money. And everyone is different. And knowing these tendencies really does affect the strategies that will speak to you, of which you execute on to get you to where you need to be. And you got to have a strong money mindset. You got to establish those narratives that move you forward. You can do this. We're focusing on what we want, not what we don't want. really important, and you've got to embed really strong financial habits. And when I say that, am I meaning you've got to lean into willpower? Absolutely not. We know that doesn't work in any arena, health, money. It's about making sure you have really good structures and support around you so that when you're tired and exhausted, you make better decisions. We're getting rid of short-term debt, absolute non-negotiable, and we've got to make sure that you're as financially resilient as possible. We've got to have a buffer. For me, that buffer looks to be 3 to 6 months of expenditure, but where you put that buffer even counts in terms of plan design. So we'll speak to that soon. And ensuring not just your stuff, but your ability to earn. Because when we're trying to sort this, when we're trying to be okay longer term, when we're trying to maximize, likely we are reliant on your ability to earn to build what comes next. And for me, that insurance piece is really critical. I mean, obviously, you don't pay too much, but again, making sure that you get that balance right. And I think that we're coming up to Matariki as well. This is often a time of reflection for lots of people. So again, it's about, well, what do you want to leave for your children, your family, and how do we really make sure I have no doubt you're working incredibly hard. Let's just make sure that that translates to the financial progress you deserve. And that KiwiSaver piece is important. It's not the be all and end all. It was never designed to be so, but it is important. We're making sure that everything works as hard as possible for you. And that's about being in the right fund and provider to maximize returns. And I've got a wee matrix for you in terms of understanding who you are and how you operate around money. Because to us, that financial success formula, 80% comes down to behavior, 20% comes down to strategy. When I design plans for my clients, I'm trying to marry the two to make sure it's sustainable. So, again, think about yourself when we go through this because everyone has their own money personality. Shopper derives emotional satisfaction from shopping, no judgment there. Saver derives emotional satisfaction from saving, and a plotter is indifferent. Doesn't particularly enjoy spending, but not super great at saving. And when you look at that, you might think, well, a saver must be a sitter for making financial progress. Not necessarily so, because sometimes that money personality feeds into your approach to risk. And we all have our different approaches to risk. So a saver, while they might be really good at accumulating cash, potentially they're not so good at growing it because they're really risk averse. And a shopper often will be more strategic if they have a goal that's sexy enough and motivating enough for them to try harder. So it's understanding who you are, your approach around risk when we design plans to make sure, again, you do what needs to be done. And as part of understanding that tendency, you got to know where that starting point is in terms of how you operate around cash. And there's different cash positions. For some people, they are sinking, which means they are going backwards. And for some people who have credit cards and they're paying the minimum amount, they think that they're floating. I actually would think that you are sinking if you can't pay off your credit card in full. Where I'm trying to get everyone is to flying. And some people come to me flying. I just want you to fly higher. But we're trying to make sure that you're saving at least 15% of your net income in terms of wealth engine thereafter. So understanding where you're at, I'd like you to figure that out in terms of your own position. And we all start from different asset positions in terms of today. So I've got a little molehill. So essentially a low asset position. You've got a small amount of assets built up, maybe a few thousand in savings, maybe a car, and limited or no investment. What it feels like, every financial bump feels kind of big. You're vulnerable to unexpected costs, dentist, car, it's always something, and you're likely living payday to payday. If that is you, my key message is This is just your starting point. It's not about shame, it's more about awareness. Molehills can grow. The focus here is really building a base, paying down debt, increasing savings, and really beginning to invest. And then I've depicted a wee mound, which I define as a moderate asset position. So you've built up some net worth. Perhaps you've got equity in a home, a KiwiSaver with a decent balance, maybe an investment property or shares. You're tracking okay, but you're not yet financially free. What that kind of feels like, you're more stable and confident. You're not worried about day-to-day spending, but long-term goals like retirement or helping your kids with education still feels a little out of reach. And my key message is you've made progress. We acknowledge that. And now it's time to be strategic. It really is. Are your assets working hard enough? And this is what I want you to be thinking about as we go through this webinar tonight. Are you protecting what you've built? This is where optimization really matters. And again, I want you to be on that mountain in terms of that asset position. What does that mean? You've got significant net worth, multiple income streams, strong investments, and low or no personal debt. Your assets could support your lifestyle long term. What it feels like. Remember, we talked about options. You may still work, but it's by choice, not necessity. You can afford to be generous, take time off, or retire early. My key message for my clients who are on that mountain, you're in wealth preservation and legacy phase. Your role shifts from builder to steward. How you protect and share your wealth becomes just as important as how you grow it. So again, understanding where you're at really does feed into wealth plan design. And I'm going to share with you now the tools in our kit that really help our clients move through those terrains to make sure that they are maximized and they're moving in the right direction. So first off, cash is the engine room of anything that happens thereafter. And how do you increase essentially what's left over? What I find with my clients, and again, Enable Me has been here for a very long time. We started post GFC. It's about often working to a plan, tracking spending. It's easy to write budgets. You've probably written budgets before, potentially color coded them. Again, anyone can write a budget. It's about sticking to a budget, and often tracking really helps. I find with my clients having better systems in place, even around bank accounts, less regular spending, bills day to day, and then we have a goal that we're striving towards. I love that saying. You never rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And part of this is saying, well, let's just have a better system and a structure that will serve us into the future. Determine your non-negotiables. You've got to live a happy life. Otherwise, what's the point in any of this? Future's promised to no one. I understand that. But very likely you're not going to be hit by a bus tomorrow. So how do we find that balance? And we're going to eliminate fritter. And we're going to talk to that in a minute. And again, that really makes sure that we're maximizing what's left over. And that first point, please be paid what you're worth. Really important. But I think for a lot of people in New Zealand, the focus is, well, I'm just going to earn more. That's what I chase. But in all reality, for most people, if they're just doing that, the more that you earn, the more that you spend, and the more you disconnect from your finances. So again, it's how do we marry all of that to make sure we are optimized? And I want to lift the hood a little bit in terms of that fritter piece. So I've got a wee happiness graph. So on average, we know people fritter about 15% of our net income. Please do the math around that. It is very significant. For some people, it's a little bit of overspending. If you have debt, it's a lot of paying too much interest to the bank, and we've got really profitable banks in New Zealand. But essentially, what that means is I'll use cups of coffee. Me and coffee, first cup of the day, I am riding that caffeine wave with lots of bang for my buck. Second cup of coffee, still pretty good. Third cup of coffee, I tend to feel a bit sick. So my optimal level of coffee drinking is 1.5 cups. Anything over and above that, I'm just doing it for the sake of it. And again, we fresh around lots of what we do. In New Zealand, it's around food, entertainment, lots of different, it's that lazy money. And part of our job as financial strategists and coaches is to find that and put that to better use. Your whole trajectory will shift when we do that. And if you have a mortgage, we're going to channel some of that surplus to pay it off as fast as possible. You got to have a plan to do so. It opens up future wealth creation options. It is a non-negotiable. And interest rate falls help. Thank goodness they're coming down, but they aren't game changers, if I'm honest with you. What matters most is the pace, not the rate that you pay. I'm going to say that again. What matters most is the pace you pay off debt, not the rate. And I'm going to illustrate that for you. Average first home mortgage of 550,000 on a mortgage rate of 5.99%. For most people, just average stat, they buy their first home at 36 and it takes them 30 years to pay off that mortgage. So that is what everyone else is doing. I will not accept that for my clients. I will not. So in doing so, over that 30 years, in this example, you're paying $635,269 of interest. If you halve that term, which is a benchmark for our clients, you pay 234,194. If we can get you mortgage free in 10 years, you're going to pay 181,687. That's a 453,600 potential savings, non-negotiable as part of your plan. If you have a mortgage, we're paying it off as fast as possible in terms of that family home. And just to be clear, only 38% of people between the age of 55 and 64 are mortgage free. So if you are feeling behind, again, we understand, but it's how do we do better? And this is the do nothing retirement projection, which is, we get mortgage free about retirement and then we will run out of money by 69. So that is a really long gap in terms of retirement that we have to fill. And for our clients, making sure that we're paying off that mortgage faster, again, it just creates more options. So in this example, we shave 10 years off that mortgage term by finding that lazy money and putting it against that mortgage optimally, which means we're mortgage free at 55 versus 65, which means we save more, which means our money runs out not at 69, but at 80 in this example. There is still a gap because I'm always trying to get my clients to at least to 90. But you think, well, 55 to 80, well, that's 25 odd years we have to let wealth do its thing and compound in terms of strategy. And again, just another stat, you're not alone. 59% of Kiwi mortgage holders are experiencing mortgage stress. So what do? We're going to grow wealth and we're going to sort retirement. And I'm going to debunk some wealth misconceptions. Wealth creation, often people say, is only for the ultra wealthy. And I'm calling BS on all of these, by the way. Requires a lot of money to get started. Absolutely not. It does not. Is another form of gambling where people lose all their money. I counter that. there is actually an opportunity cost of doing nothing, and that is generally the biggest cost you could ever incur, is only for people with a finance education. Absolutely not. Most of them aren't doing it right either. Takes too much time because you have to do it every day. Not if you do it well. Not if you do it well and set up really good systems and environments that serve you as a person. That's really what we want to make sure that we embed as part of your wealth plan. And there's one there that I really do think has fed into a lot of these misconceptions. I think often finance has been explained by people in suits using really long words, which I don't even think they understand. So I get it. But we're here to really challenge that notion, to use really accessible words and strategies that everyone should be doing to make sure that we do better ourselves and as a nation. And for most of our clients, they are working towards retirement, which is why we reference retirement as an example so frequently. But knowing how much you need, how long you have, and your tolerance to risk will influence the approach best suited for you. But you also need to consider those natural tendencies to set a goal that is exciting enough to keep you motivated. And that is why you need a wealth plan, because making all of this happen requires a few different steps at different points. So repaying your mortgage early requires the surplus and ridding yourself of debt. Then you need to assess the opportunities to build wealth, but raising financially independent kids is what will prevent your plans in retirement coming undone if they are dependent on you for longer than they should. And your plan really does start by knowing that starting point, that end game, how long you have. Because remember, we talked about timelines, and there's a smattering of people at different stages. What strategies are right for you are a lot dependent on the runway you have to retirement, also your own behavioral tendencies, and obviously the hand that you're dealt. And the right option depends on the problem you're looking to solve and your time frame. And there's lots of different options, and we're going to go through the most common ways that people invest at this present time. So I'm talking about the diminishing buying power in this slide. There are risks of leaving your money in the bank because of inflation. Any money sitting in a low interest bank account loses value over time. If time is on your hands, crafting a wealth strategy is absolutely essential. And you got to balance that risk and return. The investment that is right for you will depend on those goals and your timeline. And again, just unpacking some of those strategies. So, term deposits, great because they're liquid, safe, really passive, easy to execute, timed commitment for what you need it for. But they are such a low return. And if they are not keeping up with inflation, you are essentially banking a loss. And lots of people think they're being safe with their term deposits. But again, if you are not getting the required return to even keep pace with inflation after tax, you are again locking in a loss. So really think about that in terms of safe strategies. And lots of my clients invest in managed funds. Why is that? They're liquid. And lots of my clients more lean in. For us, we do lots of different things. It's where you lean, age and stage. So often my clients are more leaning into managed funds the closer they get to retirement or in retirement, because we need that element of liquidity. They're diversified across markets, jurisdictions, etc. There's lots of options, differing levels of risk, and they're managed on your behalf. So we've got that average returns for fund type. So your KiwiSaver is like a managed fund. It's just got rules around it in terms of redraw, etc. Drawbacks, you've got to keep an eye on fees. And sometimes there's an overwhelming choice selection. And again, I think working with a really good qualified financial advisor really does help demystify managed funds and make sure that you're getting the appropriate return in terms of your goal. For a lot of my clients, they also invest in property. Why is that? It's seen as one of the most stable asset classes in terms of least amount of volatility. Rent goes up with inflation. It's tangible. And probably the biggest reason why I like property for me and my clients is that you can leverage. And again, we'll unpack that soon. Drawbacks are low liquidity. If you need cash flow and you haven't got a good buffer, you can't sell a quarter of a house to fix your car, for example. Um, High entry fee, not all are made equal. Again, it's not about buying any property for my clients, it's ensuring they buy the right property for them. And for lots of people, they're under the notion that you have an infinite time to purchase property. You do not. As you get older, it's harder to borrow money. So, again, likely for most, when they're looking to solve a problem and they're here to grow wealth, you lean into property to really turbocharge that as part of that overarching plan. But your wealth plan, it has to be dynamic. You don't have to settle on a single approach. In fact, it's best for many to choose a mix of different investment options. Diversification is that mix of those different investments to help reduce risk. And again, just illustrating the synergy of having that early mortgage repayment, running out of money at 18, that wealth strategy is solving that problem from 80 to 90. And you think, well, if you're 55 and you run out of money at 80, we've got 25 years to solve that problem. So are we leaning into property, managed funds? Let's really understand that quantum of that gap because that will dictate what strategy is appropriate for you. 60% of Kiwis haven't thought about how much they will need in retirement. So you're doing better than most because you're here today, feeling smug. And for many, KiwiSaver won't be enough. I really like KiwiSaver. I think for lots of people, we wouldn't have saved what we had without it. But it's not, it should not be, it was never designed to be your only strategy. Average KiwiSaver balance in New Zealand is 37,000. For men, it's 42,000, higher, generally speaking, because you're not having gaps to have children, etc. Average balance for women is 35. It's still absolutely worth being part of the scheme, but it's only part of that wider wealth creation strategy. And as part of that broader plan, we're understanding, well, how much should you be contributing? Make sure you're in the right fund type for you. If you can't access that KiwiSaver for 10 years or more, likely it should be in a higher growth fund to really maximize your returns. And that cash flow piece is important. For most of my clients who are employed, they're matching what their employer's doing. Free money, why wouldn't we? But anything over and above that, they're channeling into reducing debt or growing wealth versus trapping it into KiwiSaver that we can't touch till we're 65. And if your retirement gap is greater than 300,000, you're likely going to need to use leverage to bridge it. That's just fact. And again, to be honest with you, the reason I enjoy property myself and why lots of my clients lean into property as part of that overarching strategy is that power of leverage over time outperforms other asset classes and again has less volatility over time. But property is a long-term strategy. You buy the right one and have the ability to hold the darn thing. Really important. I am not saying just buy any property. And for lots of people who come to me initially who are property investors, generally speaking, they've got one or two or a smattering, but at least one of them is generally an accidental rental, i.e., they've gone to the bank and they've set to buy a new house, and they're like, well, you could keep your old house and buy a new house. And when you unpack that, generally that capital, it served its purpose and likely it could be put elsewhere to work harder for that next property cycle. Because again, nothing to lock and leave. We're assessing everything at every point. And again, just illustrating that power of leverage with a property, 160K deposit lets you control an 800K asset. A 6% increase means a 48K gain, not just the 9.6K like a managed fund. So again, it's the acquisition of that bigger asset, not using your own money, that really makes property attractive. And rental income can offset costs. Unlike a managed fund, property can generate income to help cover expenses, make it a more self-sustaining asset. But again, the numbers have to stack up. You've got to have the right property and have a really good hold strategy. And the best approach for you depends on, again, your own situation. Everyone's different. Your plan must be tailored. And in my mind, for the vast majority of people, I really want you to be thinking about how to leverage that equity and mortgage access where possible. And please remember, investment success comes from time in the market, not chasing perfect returns. Really important. Again, it's always with any investment plan, time in the market is far better than timing the market. And again, I've said this again and again, your wealth plan cannot be lock and leave. It has to be flexible enough. So as life flexes, you flex with your plan. And we've talked about, when you are trying to solve a problem and there is a gap, likely we're leaning into property. But again, when we get closer to retirement, we're more leaning into managed funds. Are we doing one at the expense of other? No, but it's again, where do we lean? Really important. And again, you've got to have really good buffers. That is your resilience. There's nothing surer than there will be cycles into the future. We know that economic cycles, but your ability to weather storms often comes down to making sure that you do have good buffers, but also that you do what needs to be done when you have the ability to do so. So, as an organization, we've always worked, and when we speak to this, I always think of this. We've always worked really closely with Air New Zealand. Again, that meant for me personally, as a financial advisor, when we went into COVID, I was working with lots and lots and lots of air crews, pilots, which obviously was very traumatizing for them in terms of 80% of them were prolonged. I didn't even know what that word meant at the time. And again, that's tricky to just lose your job overnight. But I was so proud of them because they had done what they needed to at that point. They had a really robust strategy. They had cleared their debt. They had good buffers. Their insurance was adequate and robust. They had leaned into wealth creation when they could. They knew their numbers back to front, so they could hold their line. And geez, they were nuggety. I had clients, pilots who were driving trains, etc. And I love that mindset. Very important for pilots. If the plane's going down, you need to make sure they don't panic. But again, that really does speak to everyone can have a plan. I love that Mike Tyson quote. Everyone can have a plan until they're punched in the face. The stars will never align. It's understanding, well, what are you capable of now, and making sure that you take the action that you should today. It's so, so important. And again, enhancing that positive behavior and spending habits. Remember, for most, 15% is just slipping through the cracks. You think about how hard you work for that 15%. Remember, my job is to find that and put that to better use for my clients. You've got to have that really strong foundation and wealth mindset to really optimize at every point. And please, please don't wait to feel confident before you start. Results give you confidence. It's the inaction that really saps it. It really does. And here's what I want you to remember as we wrap up tonight. Wealth building is not complicated, but it requires intentional action. You now know the formula. Be ruthless with cash flow, but live a happy life. Every dollar left over is a wealth building soldier. Kill that mortgage debt. It's the fastest guaranteed return you'll get. Execute systematically across investment properties and manage funds. Another fallacy for so many people is they'll come along and we're like, yep, yep, we'll get mortgage free, and then I'm going to think about all of this. But if you are 10 years away from being mortgage free, in my mind, that's a lot of equity that lies latent in terms of what comes next. So, again, really important to make sure we're concurrently thinking where where do I pivot? What lever do I pull? And know your retirement number. But for most people, that's really understanding, well, what does it cost you to live a happy life? Because that's in essence what we need to facilitate when you're no longer working. Everyone has a different number. We understand yours and we execute on a strategy that gets you there when you no longer work. I really also would encourage you to partner with an advisor who'll keep you accountable and efficient. Knowing all of this stuff is great, but if you're not doing what needs to be done at the right time, it's absolutely meaningless. And please remember the biggest risk isn't market volatility. It's really not, or even economic uncertainty. It's inaction. Every day you wait is a day of compound growth you will never get back. And I want to share with you some lovely faces. So, this is our broader team. I am so proud to walk alongside these coaches. They are absolutely exceptional and hugely passionate about what they do. So, you have everything you need to start building serious wealth. The question isn't whether you can do this, it's actually whether you will. So, here's how to take action right now. I'm offering you a 90-minute initial financial diagnostic meeting with one of our qualified financial advisors for just 99. That's 301, thank you, marketing, off the regular 400 price. But this special offer is only available if you book before Friday. After that, it goes to 149 until the end of June and then back to full price. This isn't just a chat, it is honestly a deep dive into your current financial position, your goals, and a clear roadmap to get you there. 90 minutes that could change the trajectory of your wealth forever. So I wanted to leave time for questions. I know we had some amazing questions submitted prior. Amelia, do you want to hit me with the questions?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. We have had some great questions submitted. Our first question, you've actually spoken to this already in your presentation, but
Mm,
maybe you can talk a little bit more about it.
yep,
A lot
sure.
of people ask this, is it better to direct my money into saving for retirement or paying off a mortgage?
Such a good question. And it actually depends on your age, the mortgage interest rate, and how far off retirement is. Ideally, for most of my clients, honestly, we're doing both concurrently. We're balancing growing assets and reducing debt, especially as you near retirement. So, again, for most people, it's how do we do it concurrently? We're not favoring one over the other. If we have capacity to do so, we lean into that investment piece, but we've always got our eye on the prize. Let's get mortgage free as fast as possible. But remember, as I said, there is a cost of just focusing on clearing off the mortgage in terms of you're instinctively creating lots of equity in that property that just sits there doing absolutely nothing. And you think, well, a property cycle in New Zealand historically has been about 10 years. So every 10 years that you don't tap into that equity, you've missed out on a property cycle or appreciation of another asset. So again, it's always thinking about opportunity cost. Great question.
We've got another great question come in our chat just then, and
Mm,
they're talking to the 15% savings from Fritter, and they're
yes.
asking if this includes the money in, does the 15% that we are talking about include
Mm.
money in the emergency fund and extra mortgage repayments that we make?
No, generally speaking, because that's the good things, right? That's the buffer. But what does feed into that inefficiency number, for example, if we use what you've just said, is if you have a mortgage and then you've got your emergency buffer in a savings account. And remember, I said it's a non-negotiable for me that you have a buffer. But in my mind, when you have a debt, you should always, mostly, not specific financial advice, but usually you should be offsetting that debt on the proviso that you could re-access it. Because remember, you always pay more in interest on debt than you receive in savings, and then you pay tax for the privilege. So again, challenging that, well, why would we not have that savings set in a revolving credit, for example, offsetting debt but still accessible for you? That does feed into that inefficiency piece.
Thank you. Someone also asked, should I still look at property investment if I am in my 50s, or am I too old to start?
It's not too old, but you need a clear plan, a strong exit strategy, and a realistic time frame for returns. Property can work in your 50s, but strategy is everything.
And another question that's just come in, how do you deal with a bad tenant or damage to a residential property investment as part of your property strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there's layers to that question. I think buying the right property feeds into that as well. So when I think about right property for my clients, generally speaking, they would buy a new build property. Why is that? Generally speaking, they're really robust in terms of they've got a master build guarantee, etc., for 10 years. So that's naturally going to de-risk it, harder to damage. Also, it attracts a better tenant in terms of that new property. And in terms of property criteria for my clients, we're looking for strong capital growth appreciation. So that's generally areas which have strong transport links, um, job security, etc. So again, buying the right property does feed into that. And for most of my clients, it's a non-negotiable that they get that property managed well. For most people who I work with, certainly, they don't have the time nor the inclination to be mucking around vetting tenants. Leave it to the experts. It's a tax deductible cost. So again, it's mitigating risks so that doesn't happen, but also making sure that you have buffers around if anything does happen. So again, right property, right tenant, make sure that you are outsourcing that. We're a nation of DIYers. It just does not serve us generally because we think like, oh, we'll save money, we'll manage the property. No one wants to be a property manager generally. Layperson, amazing property managers, but you don't have the time nor the inclination to muck around with that, and it's not your bag. And nor do you want to be like, oh, poor Mary. I am trying to grow wealth. It's at arm's length. That's when it's really successful for people.
Right. And our last question, how much of your investment property mortgage should you be paying off before looking to buy another property to maximize your leverage?
Such a good question. My clients focus on paying it down to a point where it's cash flow neutral, so it's not costing them anything, or the cross guarantee has been released from another property. And I think you've got to focus on ensuring you've got good cash flow and a solid borrowing position before you leverage into that next property. So those are the dynamics that we're looking at for my clients.
Thanks, Katie. Sorry we can't answer everyone's questions, but if you want to learn more about what we do or how to make a booking, you can email us or give us a call tomorrow. Our number is on our website. I'll leave it to you to close off.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you take one thing away, let it be this: it's not too late, but it is time to act. The retirement you deserve doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design. Keep learning, take control, and if you need help, reach out. We're here to guide you. Have a great evening, and here's to building a future you're getting excited about. All the best. Take care. Thank you.